This this is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
On this episode of the Impressions Xchange podcast, I speak with Adriane Harrison, Vice President of Human Relations Consulting at Printing United Alliance. We discuss what diversity, equity, and inclusion really means and why creating a sense of belonging matters. We also discuss how print service providers can create a safe space for employees, including those in the LGBTQIA+ community, what types of training is available for managers and their employees, and why sometimes training alone isn't enough. Thank you, Adriane, so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. I always love talking to you.
Yes, and me as well, too. On this episode, we're going to be talking about inclusivity. And I think to start it off, we should really kind of set the stage. So do you mind kind of telling the listeners what DE&I really means when it comes to a work environment?
Sure, absolutely. So the DE&I stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think sometimes now we've been using those letters so long, nobody knows really what they mean. So diversity means you want to have members of your team, your workforce, represent people of different races, different colors, different places of origin, different genders, different abilities or disabilities, neurodiverse people, sexual orientation, people that come from sort of all different characteristics that make, us a beautifully diverse land. So it's funny. I have watched, do you ever watch reruns of shows on Netflix, old shows? Yeah. So I recently was thinking about DE&I in the context of watching Monk because he got knocked off the workforce because he's an OCD guy and he can't rejoin the police because he's OCD. And so I thought, we don't talk enough about neurodiversity being a reason to include and diversify your workforce with neurodiverse people. I've talked about it before. But anyway, that's an example of old versus new ways of looking at things. The E stands for equity. Really, it is exactly what it sounds like. Treat people equitably. Treat people based on their work, not the color of their skin, not their gender identification, not on the characteristics of them as a person, but rather their performance as a team member. Compensate them based on their position. Don't compensate them based on the fact that, you are somebody who has historically been underpaid, and so I'm going to just continue with that because I know you're not going to complain about it. Don't do that. Equity means paying people and compensating them for the job that they do, not the job history they have. It also means just treating people well, be kind to everybody, treat everybody the same. If they don't look like you, it doesn't matter. Still treat them the same as you would treat anyone else in the workforce. And inclusion really means giving people a voice. So when we talk about inclusion, we mean giving them a sense that they have skin in the game, that they're being heard and listened to. And this is a much harder thing to do, I think, than people expect, because inclusion means if you're not part of the management team, how are you getting to hear the voices of the diverse population of workers that you have? And one of the ways is you could create opportunities to hear people. So you could do town hall meetings and Q&As and listening sessions. You can create employee resource groups where those are where groups of people who share a similar characteristic might join together to talk about any challenges that they are facing in the workplace and propose solutions for that, or things that the employer can do to try and make it a more welcoming environment for people who have that characteristic. For instance, and you can invite allies, so it doesn't have to be exclusive of people who do not share that characteristic, but you want to make sure you have a balance, right? And so like the Gay Straight Alliance, and I don't know that people still call that, use that terminology, honestly, but those gay straight alliances popped up in school environments for a really long time. And we've kind of gotten away from that, and it's LGBTQ plus and things like that. It's a lot harder to say, and I have to think about it so I don't mess it up. But those are the sorts of things that employee resource group can do. They can gather people together along with their allies to talk and address things. And another part of DE&I, which you're hearing more and more of, is belonging. So I don't toss that letter onto the other letters, but what it means is it means that people feel comfortable. They feel like they're not an outsider when they come to work. They feel like they are a part of things, that sense of belonging, and you get that sense of belonging through equity and inclusion. So belonging is an outcome, I believe, a successful outcome of DE&I.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for, kind of describing everything and giving us a basis for this conversation. And I wanted to call out something that you said, and I don't even, maybe you didn't realize you said it, but it kind of
Probably I didn't, whatever it is.
No, I know, but it was wonderful. So, you called out, LGBTQIA plus, and you said, oh, I want to think about it and not mess it up. But the fact that you were thinking about it, kind of works into the next question I'm going to ask. So, we had talked prior to this call, and something you'd mentioned was gender neutral speak, and, just being intentional about trying, even if you mess something up, even if
Absolutely.
if you get it wrong, trying makes a huge difference. So, can you talk about maybe some small steps that print service providers can take to create a more inclusive, safe space where people feel like they belong?
Right. So you mentioned pronouns, and that is something that you and I had talked about prior to this podcast. Look, it's really hard to retrain the old dog to learn new pronoun uses. It just is. So, and I think that people recognize that. What is important is to try. So if you have a team member who is non-binary and they go by they, them instead of he, her, or she, him, so they, them is harder than the other pronouns because it's a plural, and people, of a certain age only use singular when they talk about a person. So it feels awkward. That's okay. You can teach yourself to do it, and you can try. And then if you mess up and you use the wrong pronouns, there is generally a very forgiving attitude towards that from your team member because you tried and they recognize that you're trying and you get it right at least as much as you get it wrong, and that matters. If you're still making a mistake, 2 years in, maybe you need to try a little harder, but try. I think that's important. So try to use the pronouns that people identify themselves with. And if you have an employee that is non-binary and uses they, them, use they, them. When you are writing emails to people, instead of saying, hey guys, or whatever, use something else. It could be as corny as, hey folks, which is something I do. So I admit right now to being corny. But that is gender neutral. So you could use gender neutral when you are sending emails or texts to people. Similarly, when you are asking somebody or you are publishing something that involves a partner, a spouse or a partner, you should try to use a gender neutral term like spouse and partner, because we don't know if somebody's non-binary and identifies as a husband or a wife. And also, you should not make assumptions when you're talking about spouses and partners that somebody has an opposite sex partner. So if you're talking to a man and they identify as a man and you say, well, are you married? Yeah. Oh, what's your wife do? Here's the thing. Maybe they don't have a wife. Maybe they have a husband. You don't know. And so don't make those assumptions. Try to use and be intentional with your speech and say, oh, what does your spouse do? It's easy enough to train yourself to do that, but you do have to, as you said, Ashley, be intentional. Because if you genderize things, you can learn to ungenderize things. And just as an HR person, I'm going to throw one more thing in here as an example. So we do a lot of environmental health and safety crossover work as HR professionals. And when we get to things like policies in the handbook, such as the dress code, and you talk about men should, and then a whole list of things men should do, and women should, blah, 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 blah. Historically, and even as recently as when I joined the industry 8 years ago, that list was very gendered, right? Not only was it broken up by gender, but the things under each gender were very exclusive. So women should wear their hair up and not long, blah, blah, blah. I know lots of men and non-binary people who have long hair, and that applies to them as well. Similarly with jewelry, that was always referenced as it related to women in the women column and not men, things like that. So you can, and also about dresses and pants and shorts. Whenever you're talking about a dress code, try to take the gender away. If you are having a work function and you want people to dress a certain way, use general terms like business casual or smart, or, daytime casual or daytime formal or whatever it is.
Right.
Don't genderize things. So these are, like you said, intentional ways to use speech to help people feel more included and accepted.
Right. And it lets them, in that example you just gave with gender neutral speak with, dress codes, it lets people then put themselves, in that speak. So if they see themselves wearing a dress to that function or
Right.
not, it's not pigeonholing the situation and saying, well, we assume that just women are going to be wearing the X, Y, and Z. So it's a way to, as you said, just make it more inclusive and
Right. And it just becomes a pattern then that you're setting an example for the rest of the team, right?
Right.
As somebody in a management or a lead role, you are modeling behavior that you want other people in your workplace to also adopt. And so these are, I was going to say subtle, but honestly, they're not so subtle ways of communicating. This is a safe space for people to be themselves. This is a place where we will honor your personal identity and characteristics, whatever they may be. And we will do our best to make you feel included and welcome in this environment. Nobody is perfect, but the message will be clear to your workforce that you are trying to create an inclusive workplace, and that will matter.
Mm-hmm. Something else, we had talked about at one point, and I don't know if you want to get into it, but there's also an issue with being able to provide people with bathrooms, and so that they feel safe and included, and that they can, go feel like they belong in their workplace. So what's a solution for a company that wants to be able to do that, to offer, bathrooms for everybody, but may not have maybe the infrastructure to, change everything right away?
Got it. So this actually, not only is it important to know just in a DE&I conversation, but there are newly revised EEOC enforcement guidance related to harassment and discrimination. And they also address the bathroom issue. So as an employer, you can make this process better and now conform with EEOC guidelines by either making your bathrooms gender neutral or making sure there is at least a gender neutral choice. So in airports, this is done. There's a men's room, there's a ladies' room, and there's a family bathroom. And so that sort of thing can act as the bridge to having bathroom neutrality. Mostly, you just let people go to the bathroom of the gender they identify with. But it's really that easy. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
It's a hard one. And I really don't want to not acknowledge the concerns of people who were raised in a 2-bathroom world and who have not a lot of exposure to gender identity changes. But I also really believe that this is something that 10 years from now, people will look back on and they'll scratch their heads and go, what was the big deal?
Right. And I think offering, as you mentioned, the option of offering like the family bathroom that can be used by anyone, I think that's a great option. And I'm sure there are companies out there that already have that, but aren't thinking of it in that way to have that kind of be their gender neutral space. And so I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
So we spoke about, some ways to make people feel more as if they're working in a space that's more inclusive and that they belong, and that's really important. But can you talk about why it's important? Like, why is it important for people to feel like they belong where they're working?
There are so many reasons. So I can't, if we had all day and a panel and a big screen to project all the data, it would really be powerful. But what we have is a couple minutes in a podcast. So let me just say this. People need to feel like they are welcome at their workplace. They absolutely need to feel safe at their workplace. I am a woman in the workplace, and I have unbelievable number of stories of not feeling safe in the workplace, and not just one workplace, pretty much almost every workplace I've ever been in. There, not this one though. So credit to Printing United Alliance. I feel safe here, but there are so many places that people who are marginalized, who are fringe or whatever, don't feel safe. You need to make sure people feel safe in the workplace. So it's very important to establish a culture of inclusivity. And that's where all the things that we've talked about up till now come to play, because people in that workplace will know this is an inclusive environment. This is a place I feel safe. This is a place where I feel I can come each day. And if somebody does treat me badly or in a way that is frankly illegal, I have recourse. I have someone to go to and they will protect me. If you establish a workplace that people feel safe and they feel like they belong, you will have lower turnover, you will have higher productivity, you will have a much better work environment morale-wise. All of that goes to the bottom line. I mean, who's kidding who? The cost of replacing people and high turnover is extraordinary. It's really, really high. And we are now in a time in our society, and I don't see it ending anytime soon. It's been going for a decade, where we do not have enough workers. We just don't. And we don't have enough skilled labor. We don't have enough unskilled labor. We don't. Turnover is very costly when there are people to step in and be trained and be replaced. We don't even have those people to step in. So if people leave, you have the cost of that decreased productivity of not having someone there and the burnout of the people that have to cover for the empty spots. So reducing turnover is really bottom line. And we all know that money matters is a bottom line reason to save money, and productivity, bottom line reason to save money. Make your workplace inclusive so that you can protect those things. But also, you want to be the good guy. Nobody wants to wake up in the morning to an inbox full of challenges about people being mistreated, people feeling like they have been harassed or discriminated against in your shop. You need to take steps to make sure that that doesn't happen. And again, creating a culture, a very clear culture where everyone is welcome, will make sure that you are not investigated by the EEOC, that you are not having lawsuits filed against you, and that your employees actually like to see you when you walk in the building. I mean, I don't know. Again, I could go on for hours, but those would be the high points.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to start. And, I'm sure there are people listening that are already taking steps to build a more inclusive workspace, which is wonderful. But for those who are maybe a little hesitant to adopt new practices or try new things. Is there any training that, print service providers can look for their employees or for managers to kind of set that bar, like you said,
Right. There is, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion training. There is anti-harassment training, and there's anti-discrimination training. And all of those, even if you are not going through your workplace with a fine-tooth comb, all of those should be happening anyway. I would put it on a cycle of about every 2 years so that you hit the people who are new and anybody who's come since the last time training took place. And then every 2 years is a good amount to remind people of ways that they can check their behavior and be mindful and intentional about their behavior so as not to offend or to cause a problem for another employee or team member. Sometimes harassment is not intentional. It just happens because people are insensitive or unaware. So the training creates an opportunity for awareness. So that's really important. I would also say that you don't have to change everything all at once. Incrementalism matters. I think there is certainly in the last 15 years a immediacy that has been sort of baked into societal expectations. Everything has to change completely right away. No, it actually doesn't. So the first step could be to make sure you get the training on the books. The second step could be to go through your policies manual and make sure that you check all the genderization of everything, that you check all of the dress codes, and you check things for sensitivity of people of color or marginalized groups that might work in your area. You might want to publish your book in 2 languages or more. Right? There are ways to do that. So that would be another step to take. A third step would be to look at your holiday schedule and reconsider that while Christmas is universally, everybody's off at Christmas, whether you're Christian or not, you might want to reconsider switching your holiday schedule to all floating holidays, and then people can choose. And like, for instance, we're having this conversation and it's a Muslim holiday, Eid, E-I-D, Eid is right now. We don't have it off in our company, but we have floating holidays. So if anybody celebrates that, they can take it off, no problem. You get to pick. So that's another way to look at it. I know that seems like a dramatic change, but it really isn't. It really isn't that a big deal. And it is an acknowledgement that not everybody celebrates all the same holidays. So these are like steps that I don't consider giant steps. I consider them actually pretty small steps towards getting to a culture of inclusion and to recognize the diversity within your workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I could be totally off base here, but I think, something that you said about acknowledging, I think that's a huge, the actions speak very loudly. So even if we're work in progress and implementing things, the fact that, if you're trying and you're offering training and you're, changing the way things are worded in your, process books, I think that speaks really loudly to employees, or at least it would to me, just having that or knowing that the leadership is thinking about it, I think is a really great step.
Yeah, I think, again, it's just like when we talked about pronouns, just showing that you care enough to try and you're making a genuine effort at trying. It matters. It matters. It helps people feel like, okay, I can get on board with this. And I think people would be surprised, because I do think that management is not aware of the diversity that may exist currently in their workforce. And by sort of throwing open the door by these small steps that we've talked about, they will see people being able to be their true selves in the workplace. So you might have a transgender employee in your workforce that you don't know about because they have been hiding it from you because they are afraid to be their true selves at work. And once they have a signal that, oh my God, it's okay for me to be myself here, you may start to see changes in people. Gay, straight, ability disability, right? There are so many people who have hidden disabilities and neurodiverse issues, and those are so buried and hidden because they don't want to be othered. And when you start signaling that it's okay to be you, you might be really surprised at how many of your employees come forward or somehow reveal that they are, in fact, have these characteristics that they have been hiding.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So, we've talked about training and kind of building things into your processes, but is training enough? I mean, building things into processes, sounds like it would be beneficial. What does that look like, and how would that kind of work?
Yeah, I think that people need to have a trusted person. Better to have more than one person that they can go to express any kind of issues that they may be having in the workforce, or just sort of a trusted person that they can say, hey, look, have you guys considered this? So they may not be having an issue, but they want to be able to come forward with suggestions. So this is part of that inclusion and having a voice, right? So you want to create a process or be clear in your policy manual or something posted somewhere that people can see of, hey, if you have suggestions, concerns, questions, you can approach XYZ people, anyone on the management team or the HR director or whoever it is. So that's part of it, I think. Also in your benefits, right? When you are picking your benefits and you're choosing healthcare, think about the healthcare contracts that you are signing up for, and think about who will have access to those. And, right now in the crosshairs is, of course, birth control and women and abortion coverage and things like that. And in addition, gender affirming care is in the crosshairs. These are all lightning rod controversial issues. You need to consider, is this something that we want to sign a healthcare plan that includes that or doesn't include it? And when you make that choice, you are making a statement, and you need to consider what that communicates to your team. So there's that. Also, as you communicate your healthcare benefits and your other benefits, the way that you phrase things, the coverages that you offer, things like that, talking about spouses and partners and things like that. You can also avoid gendered language in those. That's helpful. And I just think there are big things and small things that you can do in your processes that will indicate if you are a open workplace to diverse employee groups.
Thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you think would be important to, tell listeners or make sure to mention?
You know what? I guess as a final message, this is what I'd like to say. You should treat people with respect. It doesn't matter who they are, and it doesn't matter what role they are assuming in your workforce. Treat people with respect. Think about what that means and be intentional with how you interact with them. When you treat people with respect, they will respect you, and you will have a much better workforce as a result. You will model good behavior for everyone on your team. And when you come across people who are being disrespectful to others, take action. I really think if you really look at all of these issues we've talked about, and they're very important issues, and you look at them through the lens of trying to be respectful of someone, it doesn't seem that hard.
I love that. Thank you so much. So, if listeners were looking for more information or wanted to get in contact with you, to learn more or to talk through some strategies, can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am available at printing.org. You can email me at aharrison@printing.org. I have the Center for Human Resources Support, or we call it CHEERS, on the printing.org website. So you can reach out to me. If you are not a member, I would strongly encourage you to join the Alliance. It's such an affordable option to provide not just support from me, but like stunning amounts of support from, our EHS team, our government affairs team, our research group. I mean, it's just, and, there's discounts and all that other kind of stuff that comes with membership. But I can't stress enough how being a member supports the work we do, but also we are here for you. You can call us up, you can email us, you will get attention from us unless we are out of the office, and then you'll get a message from us literally same day. I mean, it could be same moment if you're lucky. We're not tied up in a meeting or something. So it's really worthwhile to reach out. And I am more than happy to spend time talking to people about how they can evaluate their workplace to create more inclusive and diverse and equitable options for their team.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Adriane. I think this has been really enlightening and hopefully will help some people who want to make some small changes in their businesses.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. And I really appreciate this is sometimes a difficult conversation. I wish it wasn't, but sometimes it is. And I hope that the people listening have heard it with open hearts and open minds.
I want to thank Adriane for joining me on today's episode. I will include a link to Printing United Alliance's website below, along with Adriane's contact information. I also want to thank you, our listeners. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Impressions Xchange podcast.